Dissenter means a person who does not agree with beliefs of the leaders. Self-government means people making laws for themselves. Banish means to force someone to leave. Now we will learn about New England and the colonies. 1600 to 1700 is a time that we are going to talk about. Massachusetts colony. Massachusetts colony had Puritans. They set example by following laws of Bible. They had a meeting house, and town meeting was held in that meeting house. On every Sundays, the town gathered in the meeting house. The meeting house was an important building. So the town meeting happened once a year. The colonists held elections and voted for the town. Men who owned property only can vote. Rhode Island colony. The Rhode Island colony was founded by Roger Williams. Roger Williams was a Puritan and he was a dissenter. Dissenter is a person who does not agree with beliefs of the leaders. Roger Williams believed that government should not make laws about religion. So, the Puritan leaders banished Roger Williams from Massachusetts. So, since he is out of Massachusetts colony, Roger Williams in 1636 founded Rhode Island colony for religious freedom. That means people can worship freely in Rhode Island. Another person, Annie Hutchinson, was a Puritan and she challenged church leaders. She held meetings in her home and talked about religion to men. The Puritan leaders did not like it. The Puritan leaders banished Annie Hudson. Connecticut, New Hampshire, and Maine colonies. Thomas Hooker was a minister and he wanted to form a community where all men could vote. So, in 1636, he founded Connecticut colony. Now let's talk about the conflicts that was going on during that time. In 1630, Puritans were fighting with American Indians, and that was called Pequot War. So in that time, the colonists and the Pequot Indians were fighting with each other. The second conflict or fight was King Philip's War. The Metacomet, who was a leader of the Wampanoag tribe, had a small army and he was fighting with King Philip, who was a colonist, and King Philip had more soldiers. And at the end, the small army was defeated. So the Metacomet was defeated in 1676. So we learned about two conflicts. One is the Puritans versus American Indians, and the second one was the Metacomet, the leader of Wampanoag tribe, versus King Philip, the colonist. Life in New England. The farmers cultivated wheat, oats, peas. The geography of New England had rocky coast, harbor, forest. From forest, the woods like oak wood and pine wood were used to make ships or build ships. In Boston, a big shipbuilding industry was developed, and shipbuilding industry is a business that makes ship. In New England, fishing like whaling happened. The fishing industry used cod, whales. The fishing industry exported cod to Europe and West Indies, and they exported the product from whales like oil for lamps. Exports are products that are sent to other countries, and imports are products that are brought into one country. In New England, the export items are fish, whale oil, lumber, tobacco, and the export happened to the countries like Europe, Africa, and West Indies. Now let's see the items that were imported. Tea, spices, furniture, cloth, tools. Triangular trade. Triangular trade was a trade that happened within three countries like North America, Europe, and Africa. So the trade that was happening within North America, Europe, and Africa was called triangular trade. Slave trade. Slave trade means slavery, selling human beings for money. For example, the Africans were sold as slaves. In New England, the sports they played were horse racing, bowling, baseball called town ball, ice skating, and sledding. The college they had was Harvard College in Massachusetts that was founded in 1936. Great Awakening happened in New England. What is Great Awakening? Great Awakening is a renewed interest of religion. So that means the ministers like Jonathan Edwards, George Whitefield, they urged people to renew their faith by inspiring sermons. They persuaded people to follow God. They increased the people's faith in God by their inspiring sermons. Now let us learn about middle colonies, and the time period was 1664 to 1723. New York colony and New Jersey colony, the settlement began in 1664. So the Dutch colony from the New Netherlands was given to James, the Duke. He was a brother of a king. And James is a proprietor for the New Netherlands colony. So who is a proprietor? A proprietor is a person who owned and controlled all the land in a colony. And what did James do? James gave a part of the land to John Berkeley, who was his friend, and the rest to his another friend, George Carteret. So that is how we got East Jersey and West Jersey colony. Okay, so in those colonies, there was governor. The governor had council, which was a small group. The governor also had assembly in the council. Assembly was a representatives, and they helped in making laws. Next, let's just learn about Pennsylvania and Delaware colonies. Pennsylvania was founded by William Penn. William Penn was a member of Quakers. Quakers is a religious group that believe that Christians should be free to worship in their own way. In 1681, King Charles II gave William Penn, Pennsylvania. Duke of York gave William Penn a land, and that became the Delaware colony. Okay, so William Penn created laws that said that the colonists can voice their opinions, they can worship freely, and Penn let the colonists elect representatives to assembly. Penn treated American Indians with respect, so he had fairness. Penn also made fair treaties, like Delaware Lenape. So the treaty is an official agreement that happens between nations or groups. The next one is Philadelphia colonies. William Penn chose a site where two rivers meet, Delaware and Schuylkill. It was an excellent harbor. The roads were good, and it was the biggest city in British colonies. Newcomers to middle colonies. Why were
Life in middle colonies. The timeline is 1600 to 1750. The people who lived in middle colonies were enslaved Africans, Scots, Irish, Scandinavian, English, Dutch, and Germans. The population was diverse. Why was the population diverse? The population was diverse because of religious tolerance in middle colonies. So the middle colonies had religious tolerance. Next, let's see about the colonists. There were two groups. One were called Quakers, or members of other Protestant churches. The Quakers worshipped in meeting houses. The other group was called Jews, and the rest were called Catholics.
Newcomers to middle colonies. Why were people coming in and wanted to be in middle colonies? Because middle colonies had religious tolerance, inexpensive land, and people can farm their own land because the soil was good, the climate was good, and for better way of life. And people also arrived at the ports of New York or Philadelphia. How do they farm their own land? No. Why did newcomers come to middle colonies? Because in middle colonies, there was religious tolerance, inexpensive land, and people can arrive at the ports of New York or Philadelphia. They had better way of life. They can farm their own land. They can farm their own land because the climate was good, the soil was good, the farmer's family worked in the fields, including children, the livestock they had were cattle and pig. The grains they cultivated was wheat, corn, barley. They were cultivating more grains. So this middle colony was known as the bread basket of the 13 colonies. So they had surplus. What is surplus? If they have more than what is needed, it was called surplus. So whatever they had surplus was sold, and that is how they earned a living. They also shipped grain and livestock. Southern colonies, the timeline is 1600 to 1750. The southern colonies are Virginia colony, Maryland colony, North Carolina colony, South Carolina colony, and Georgia colony. First, let's see about Virginia colony. Virginia colony was the wealthiest English colony in North America. They had a plantation. Plantation is a large farm on which crops were raised by workers. Usually the workers were enslaved Africans. So what happened was the plantation owners became wealthy by growing and selling cash crops. The cash crops that they had was tobacco, rice, etc. So there was also a conflict that was happening between the colonists and Powhatan Indians. The colonist was fighting for the land with the Powhatan Indians, and because of this, people got killed in this conflict. Legislation. Legislation is a group of people with power to make and change laws. The House of Burgress is a place where this legislature happened, or the group of people met. And this legislature had representatives. These representatives were elected by the colonist. In 1632, Anglican Church became official church of Virginia. So the others had to leave the colony. The others were Puritans, Quakers, and non-Anglican had to leave the colony. The next colony is Maryland colony. In 1632, King Charles I of England gave land to Cecilius Calvert, who was also called Lord Baltimore. So Maryland colony was a refuge for Catholics. In 1649, a Toleration Act was passed by the Maryland government. So this act was the first law that Christians could worship freely. The Toleration Act was the first law that said that Christians could worship freely. Refuge for Catholics means a safe place for Catholics. Maryland colony was a refuge for Catholics. The next colony is Carolinas. In 1663, Charles II founded this colony. A plantation that happened in the Carolinas was rice. The city of Charlestown was called Charleston. In 1729, it became two colonies, like North Carolina colony and South Carolina colony. The next colony is Georgia. In 1732, George II, England's king, gave land to James Oglethorpe, who was an English lawmaker and army officer. Georgia colony was a refuge for poor people and debtors. The trade happened in the colony with the Choctaws, Cherokees, and Creeks. The rules of Georgia colony was that there should be no slaves and they should not have any drinks like alcohol. We have learned about New England colonies, middle colonies, and southern colonies of North America.